All right, Genesis chapter 31. I'm sure you know, as I do, it's hard to trust somebody who is lied to, especially if they have lied to you more than once and pretended to do something or to tell you something to try to get out of trouble, and then you find out later they didn't mean a word of it. They either just were trying to get out of trouble, or they were trying to get you to be quiet, and they just said whatever they needed to say. It's hard to trust people like that, ain't it? And so we can see from this family, with all the deceit that has gone on, and all the lies, and even how sometimes they are still playing these games of trying to benefit themselves and get what they want while deceiving other people in their own family. I mean, how horrible is that? And here we have these people in the Old Testament who were practicing that kind of living. Lying to each other, deceiving each other, and sometimes not even being willing to admit it and say, well, I shouldn't have said that, or, I know I told you that and I didn't follow through on it, but here's what I intend to do. And we deal with that today. We deal with that in our families. Churches deal with that. Our country deals with that. And it seems like we have a government that lies to us. And then when they get caught, they just double down on it. Or blame somebody else. Well, this was going on with Abraham's family too. And it's hard to trust somebody like that, ain't it? Can we ever rebuild trust with a person who has lied to us? And how do we ever do that? Now, those things that we'll have to look at. We won't really get to that tonight in this passage because it's still lies. But how do we ever get to the point where God will get Jacob to and Rachel and their descendants? How will God ever get them to the point where they're not just deceivers and liars and manipulators, living by their own worldview rather than trusting God? How will God ever change Jacob? We're starting to see it that he has in wrestling with God, and we'll see more of that as we get through this chapter. But let's read the first couple, not the first couple verses, but in this passage. Chapter 31 of Genesis, verses 22 through 24. So we saw last week how Jacob has left. He's taken what was his. He's taken his wives. And they are both now on his side because both of his wives said, our father cheated us too. He took what was supposed to be ours and he spent it on himself. So you do whatever your God has told you to do and we'll go with you. So that's what has happened. And they left. And in verse 22 it says, and Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey. And he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. So, it took Laban, or it had been 3 days that Jacob had been gone, and before he learned about it. And he learned that Jacob had left and he'd taken all of his flocks and his sheep and everything. He'd taken it all. The goats and everything. The women, his wives, Laban's daughters, the grandchildren, the servants. They had all left. And were headed back towards Canaan. They crossed the Euphrates and here they were. Well, without this caravan like Jacob had to slow him down, Laban and this group of his brethren, children, family members, other men, it seemed like anybody that was willing to go after Jacob with him as a soldier. He got a posse together, a large one, and said, we're going after him. And they went. but he had a dream, and God said, don't you do anything wrong to him. If you catch him, you speak to him, and when you catch up with him, don't do anything to him. And it seems strange, but we remember how God warned Abimelech about Sarah. Don't touch her. Don't you let any of your men touch her. If you do, then you're going to pay. It's the same kind of dream that Laban had here. And here he's referred to as the Syrian. He's not referred to anymore as the father of Rachel and Leah. He's referred to as the Syrian. So what we're seeing there in the battle and the pursuit for Jacob, for the Jew, we see that even today in the battles between the Syrians, the Arabs, and the Jewish people in Israel. And it's a pretext of what's going to go on between these two peoples. But now even Laban, he's not recognized as Jacob's uncle. He's referred to as the Syrian. It's the presentation of Jacob's enemies and where they come from and who they are even to this day. And the relatives that joined Laban for this military adventure, for Laban to say, and he'll say it in verse 29, I have the power to harm you. If we're going to have a fight here, if this is going to be a war between us over what you've done and how you've taken all this stuff thinking it was yours when I didn't say you could leave with it, what you've stolen from me, he didn't steal from him. But the way Laban looked at it, he did. And again, it was like, that's mine, no, that's mine. And but Laban said, I can hurt you. I've got the power to harm you. And Jacob will take the threat seriously. Aren't there times in our life when a person who really has no reason to go against us, they really don't have anything that they could say, if I want to harm you, I've got a reason to do it. And we think, well, but I haven't done anything to you. Why are you so against me? Why have you come after me like this? And yes, that happens. And there are times even when we think people don't have a reason to come after us, that we have to take their threats seriously. And I think about those patriots who went to that rally in Washington on January the 6th. Most of them just to say, this election don't look right. This election was stolen, and we want to protest it. Now, some of them, and I agree that the ones who went into the Capitol were motivated by plants from the FBI and other groups. And they got caught up in the emotion of it, and some of them did the wrong thing. I actually planned to go to that rally because I thought the election was stolen. I was going to go up there and express it. I don't think this is right. And then if I couldn't go because of sickness. But do you realize that there were people at that rally who did not enter the Capitol, but are still are in jail today because they have been labeled and arrested as an insurrectionist? I mean, some of them in solitary confinement. Now, those who broke the law, who assaulted police, they should have been arrested and put in jail. But people who were just in Washington, and they're still going after them. Even after a year later, the FBI and the Washington police, the Capitol Police, they are still trying to find out everybody who was at that rally. They're checking their texts, their emails, and their associations, and they're still arresting them and putting them in jail. And people are saying, like I would have said, I just came up here to voice my protest about this election. I don't think it was right. I might be in jail today. There are people who are just for that. And so I would have said, I didn't do anything. I haven't done anything wrong. I've used the First Amendment to express my opinions. But that's what happened here. Jacob could have said, I didn't do anything. But Laban said, look, yes, you did. And if I wanted to, I could hurt you. So let's start with verse 25. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done, that you have stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword?" Is he exaggerating a little bit? Yeah, just a little bit. "Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and song, with timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Now, this is quite a story that Laban is presenting here. The uncle-nephew relationship has disappeared. And it's been replaced by opposition, almost a military-type conflict and meeting between them, if you look at the language of this passage. So what causes a family to turn from supporting and blessing each other and being a family to a conflict and threats and accusations? Why does a family go from support and blessing to conflict and accusations? Same thing we see here, isn't it? You know, you're not doing what I want you to do. You didn't treat me right. You didn't allow me to do what I wanted to do. It can be that. It can be like it was here. It can be over, we see all kinds of stuff here. It can be over family members and how they are and how they get treated. It can be over money and possessions. And it can be over religion. It can be over church or gods. And what he says, we see all of that right here in this relationship. Just in this short passage, we see all of that. Where a family of support and blessing and prosperity turn to a family of conflict and accusations over his daughters and granddaughters and grandchildren, over the possessions, and over what God had said. Now Laban exaggerated, of course, but the conflict between them had been going on for a long time in Laban's perspective. Now Laban said, "You've been treating me like this for a long time. You've been taking advantage of me for a long time." He had forgot. He made him stay for all those years. But his thinking is, Jacob, you've been taking advantage of me. You've gained all this wealth. You've married my daughters. You got grandchildren. You got children by them. And you've taken everything from me. You've robbed me of all my happiness because you took everything that was important to me. So he's exaggerating because none of it was really true. Been going on though for a long time from Laban's point of view, and it was all Jacob's fault. And he acted like, here he acts like he just loves his daughters. You know, I wish I could have had a party, a going away party for y'all. And we could have had music and dancing and a feast. We could have had a good old time before you left. If you would have just told me. Now, is that what Laban would have done? No, he would have deceived him again. He wouldn't have let him take anything. And they all knew it. And evidently he didn't realize his daughters had already switched loyalties. Remember what they said last week? Our father stole from us too. You will do whatever you want to do. We'll go wherever you want to go. They had already decided that they were done with trusting their father, and they were going to trust Jacob and go with him and his God. But Laban expected that. When he said, "Well, you've stolen away my daughters and my grandchildren," he thought immediately that they would all just come to his side and say, yes. You know, that Rachel and Leah said, yes, honey, we can't believe you did our daddy like that. But they didn't do that. They were no longer going to defend his deception and his greed. And the question that Laban asked Jacob, what have you done? Is put in the exact same words and frame of reference when Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah, when Jacob asked Laban, what have you done? It's the exact same question. Laban now says, what have you done to me, Jacob? Whereas before that, Jacob, what have you done to me, Laban? And isn't that the way it is? It's like us saying, well, why don't you do that to me? And we might answer, well, you did it first. It ain't my fault. You won. No, you did this to me. Well, I did it because of what you did. And that's kind of the silly argument that they would have. But Laban repeated again to Jacob the dream that he had, that God said you can't touch it. But he decided he was going to give Jacob a piece of his mind. He wasn't going to do good or bad to Jacob, but he was going to give him a piece of his mind. Jacob should have probably got the advice that I've got before. Don't give anybody too big a piece of your mind because you don't have that much to spare. And so Laban decides, though, he's going to let him have it, and he does. But it comes to kind of the point where, you know, your God said, I can't do you good or evil. Maybe he's got the idea that he's ready to forgive Jacob of all that stuff, of taking his daughters, of taking the flocks and the servants and everything. But there's a but. You know, okay, I'll forgive you of all this stuff. Maybe it was yours to take, but you've stolen my gods. You took something that wasn't yours. And so then we come to verse 31 through 35. Get on the right page of my Bible here. Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. For I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. See, even in what Laban had said, I was going to throw you a party. Jacob knew, you would not have let me leave. You've got more soldiers than I do. You would have kept your daughters. You'd have said, okay, you go if you want to, but you ain't taking none of this stuff, and it's yours. And so Jacob says, I was afraid this is what you would do. And then he says in verse 32, with whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. Now, at this time, does Jacob know? He doesn't know what happened. So he says, whoever you find your gods with, because Jacob said, I didn't take your gods. I didn't steal them. So whoever you find that did, you kill them. And he says, in the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. And he searched, but did not find the household idols. So here, if nothing else, Jacob is honest that he was afraid of what Laban would do if he waited and told Laban about his plan to leave. He was afraid. He had reason to be afraid. He took that seriously. And he had no knowledge of what Rachel had done. It's like a last-minute thing. They were packing up. Rachel's looking around, gathering all the stuff that's hers, and she sees these gods of her father. We talked about that, so we won't go into detail. But she decided to take them. So she put them in her sack, and she took them. And he invited Laban will search, and as we said, put to death anybody who took them. I won't defend them. If somebody stole your stuff, I won't defend them. He has no idea, no thought that it would have been his wife that would have done such a thing. He wouldn't have believed it. And it would have been intense. Laban's brethren, his mafia guys, his tough guys, go ripping through everything, looking, they're taking apart everything in these tents, looking for those gods, and they don't find anything.
It don't tell if Jacob ever found out.
No, it don't.
I'm looking.
No, it don't say a word about it, does it? Don't say a word about it. So if he did, he's quiet about it. He said too much already. Yeah, but it don't tell us. That's right. That's right, Mason. But these tough men tore through everything. They didn't find anything. And then I put it here as the third greatest deceiver, because we would include Laban and Jacob in all the deceit that we read about. Rachel inherited some of that from her father. And so she's pretty good not only at taking stuff, but knowing how to hide it. And she hid it in the camel's saddle, and then set up on the camel, and she said to her father, "My Lord," using this title to build up his ego. She knew how to use his ego against him. "My Lord, forgive me. I would get down and bow before you, but I've got my period going on here, and so I can't get off the camel and allow you to search it." He was like, "Okay, then you just stay right there." And he went along with that. But it all makes us wonder about the spiritual condition of his family. Now, we were talking about how in the last couple of chapters, Jacob has started to change. He's had an encounter with God. And there's a desire building in him to know God and to follow God. But he keeps going back to his old ways. There's an awareness of the Almighty, even with Laban. He says, "Your God spoke to me in a dream." There's an awareness of God, and yet there are these false gods that play a huge role in Laban's life and in his family, even still with Rachel. Even though Rachel had said, "My father is a deceiver, he's a liar, he's proud, he's wasted our inheritance, he stole from us," but there's still an aspect of her life that is connected to her father's gods, to the false gods. Even though there's an awareness and they're starting to move towards the Almighty, there's still a grip that the false gods have on their life. And how true is that of Christians today? That we are aware of God, and maybe even a large segment of our thinking and our life, that we want to know Him. We want to do what's right. We want to live for Him. But there are just some things about the past, maybe something that we got from our family, maybe something we were involved in before we got saved, or before we really committed our lives to the Lord, and we're just having a hard time letting go of it. Do you see Christians like that? Who, they will tell you that they got saved, that they know Jesus, that they want to follow Him and believe in Him. But there's just some things in their life that they can't seem to escape. They can't change. Or that they haven't yet. Well, we see that with Jacob, certainly. And we see that with Rachel. And I think it's true of a lot of the church today. There are people who are interested in the things of God, but they haven't made a full commitment. And there's some things from their past that they won't let go of. And that still has a grip on them. Now, that should say 36 through 37 instead of 27. We won't read backwards here. But let's go to 36 and 37. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my trespass? What is my sin?" So just exactly, what have I done wrong to you? That's what he's asking. What is my sin? That you have so hotly pursued me. You came in here acting all high and mighty, accusing me of stuff, and now you've looked through everything I've got, and you can't find anything. So what's wrong? What is my sin? Just show it to me. Bring it out in the open and let's deal with it. Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. So Jacob gets mad. I mean, he said, you search for it. If you find it, you kill whoever's got it. But when they couldn't find anything after what he had tore up, he said, you've searched everything. Now you just lay it out here in front of your brother and let everybody see it. It's like let's just put everything on the table. Let's just lay everything out here. You make your case, and I'll make mine, and let's get somebody to make a judgment about it. I've been in that position a lot as a family counselor, as a marriage counselor, where people just say, okay, well, let's lay it on the table, and let's make a judgment about who's right and who's wrong. And I have done that. You think people always like when I make that judgment? No, they don't. And whereas most counselors will counsel people and they say, well, how do you feel? How do you feel? And what do you think you should do? And I'll do that. I say, well, look, this is what God says. This is what you did, and you're wrong. And you need to change it. You need to quit it. Sometimes they will, a lot of times they won't. So Jacob is saying, look, lady, it's time for us to settle this. You've been accusing me of this stuff, and just lay it out here. It would have been hard. But Laban's search turned up empty, and Jacob lost it. He was mad. It even says he was angry. And we get that way a lot of times when people falsely accuse us. But, with Mason's question, I think that's interesting. Because he still didn't know. We don't know if he ever found out. You know what? After all of this, Rachel may have wised up and may have said, hey, along the trail somewhere when they were still going, she may have said, excuse me, I got to go over here out here in the woods to use the bathroom. And she might have got rid of them things because she knew this is going to be trouble. I'm going to get rid of this stuff. And on the other hand, it may have just never come up. She may have kept them hidden. We don't know what happened. But if I had to guess, I would say somewhere along the trail, that saddlebag got taken out into to a cave or the woods or something, and she got rid of it. But he's been falsely accused. He wants judgment made, and he goes from the accused to the accuser. That happens to us often when we feel like somebody has falsely accused us. All right, let's go to 38 through 34, and then we'll stop with this part tonight before we get into the covenant that they made. Verse 38. And Jacob, he's upset. He's not willing just to let it go. He said, these 20 years, so he's counting them up. I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. And he said, look, everything, all the good that's happened to you and all the bad that happened to me, I never asked you to make up for it. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. He counted every one of them, didn't he? Jacob wasn't forgetting about any of the mistreatment. Laban had come here chasing him, accusing him, and now he's the accuser. And he's unloading the whole thing. You ever done that with anybody? Just let them have it. Here's where Jacob is giving Laban a piece of his mind. Unless, he says, unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. So Jacob's saying, I don't believe any of that junk you said when you first came up, of how good you would have treated us, and how much you would have sent away with us. I don't believe a word of it. This is what you would have done. You would have sent me away empty-handed. You have never treated me right, and you would not have treated me right this time either. And I know that in the presence of the God of my fathers. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. So here, Jacob, he unleashes everything that has been pent up in the way Laban has treated him. But the ultimate accusation is, that dream you had last night, regardless of what's going on between me and you, that was God rebuking you. And you better listen to what God says. So he released all of his feelings. He declared to Laban that God was the one who rebuked him. He says, Laban, you've not only treated me wrong, but all this time you've been against God too. You're worried about those little idols you've got. You ought to be worried about the God that you go against. The God that has rebuked you. But Laban, as we'll see when we get on down next week, Laban answered and said, and what he does, he admits nothing. He doesn't yield an inch. He doesn't say, well, okay, Jacob, I hear what you're saying about all the things that I did to you. And yes, your God spoke to me, and I feared him. He just didn't admit anything, he done anything wrong. He didn't try to give any explanation of what he had done wrong. And he accepted no blame for the situation. Often it's this sort of argument that splits families apart. Where everything's laid out. Both sides, both parties talk about how they've been offended and hurt and disappointed. But even after both parties say, here's how I feel, here's how I see it, here's what you've done to me, and the other person says, well, here's how I see it, here's how I feel, and here's what you've done to me, they walk away and nobody says, you're right. I did act that way. You're right, I did. And when that happens, people may live under the same roof, but it's no longer a companionship. It's no longer a relationship. It's just people in a contract. Because this is what splits families apart. When people give each other not just a piece of their mind, but they lay out the whole problem. And they lay it out, and the other person doesn't even listen. The other person's only thinking, well, how can I defend myself? Because isn't that what both of these guys did? How can I defend myself? How can I prove that I'm right and you're wrong? However, they will come to a contract, a covenant, that will resolve the bitterness and the hatred that's going to mean that they're going to go their separate ways. It's sad when that happens in a family, but it does. We'll talk about that more next week when we look at this covenant. Laban conceded he had lost this battle, or he had lost the argument. But he wasn't going to make anything right. But he does call for peace, a peace treaty. Well, let's see if we can at least get along, come to and not kill each other. Let's see if we can at least not kill each other. That's basically what they said. All right, again, thank y'all for being here tonight. For the prayer time and the Bible study. Keep your prayer list and pray for people throughout the week. Will someone lead us in a closing prayer before we go home? Hey, thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've made. We thank you for this church family. We're so grateful for how they love you and love one another, Lord. I lift up those on the prayer list. There's so many suffering, struggling, family members trying to help them fight through this time, Lord. I lift our country up to you. It's in dire straits, dire needs. This world is evil. It's there's lots of evil all around us all the time, so I ask you, protect us, walk with us, and you know you do. I ask you to stay with us tonight. When you leave here, watch over each and every family and bring us back Sunday, Lord. We love you and we thank you for all you've done for us. We thank you for your grace and your mercy and your peace that only comes through you.
Yes.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.